Hello there. Tonight, we walk into a Japanese war camp from the last hard decades of the warring states, an age when Sashimono back banners moved like small sails in the dusk, when new tanegashima matchlocks were tended by brazier light, and when armor was the practical kind, tanegashima plates laced with silk and hinged for marching rather than parade. Canvas jinmaku curtains mark the square of the commander's hanjin. Rope knots remember the hands that set them. Standards stitched with family mon lean in the evening air as if reading the ground plan. Rice is measured by go and show into plain wooden tubs. Bundles of arrows rest in their cords. Powder gourds sit with corks faced inward, modest and sure. Lanterns in wood frames find their smaller ovals. A kettle agrees to breathe once. The map table settles its corners under stones that know which ridge is which. This is not a camp told in trumpet notes, but in low instruments. Brush on paper, ash over coal, sandals on tamped earth. Each sound a small order that makes the night understand itself. We will move slowly between lanes brushed straight for carts and mess lines. Past racks where waraji straw sandals dry heel to toe. Past stands that cradle kabuto helmets and minpo face guards wiped clean of dust. A file of a shigeru loosens bowstrings and lays yari and naginata along the matting. The gun crew trims slow match and swabs bores without hurry. Seals press red circles on pale lists. A conch horigai tests one patient note and then rests. Firebreaks are checked, buckets set in pairs, wells capped. The watch roster is copied by lamp and read back, so every post will know its hour. Nothing here is loud, and nothing here is careless. The night will be held by habits. Cords checked, knots laid flat, cups turned mouth down, lamp wicks taught a smaller flame, until the camp takes the shape that sleep prefers, the shape you can borrow now. And softly, out a little longer, while banners darken to silhouettes and the ground forgets the day's boots. The road arrives before the men do. It comes as tamped earth with cart ruts glazed by the last light, as grass pressed flat where scouts stepped off to measure distance by stride, as a faint smudge of ash where a noon cook fire was persuaded to behave. Out of that long brown sentence the camp begins to appear, not with shouts, but with the deliberate grammar of stakes and rope. To a shigeru kneel, set a corner post, and square it to the world by a cord stretched and plucked like a quiet string. Another pair follows, planting the next, then the next, until the rectangle of the commander's hanjin is written on the ground the way a brush writes a character it has practiced for years. The jinmaku, canvas curtains the color of unpolished rice, rise from their bundles and learn their lines. Edge ties pass from hand to hand and find their knots. A seam that drifted under rain is corrected with 2 careful stitches and a breath. When the curtain settles, the wind discovers it is a wall and agrees to go around. Standards take their posts as the light loosens its hold on color. Sashimono back banners that moved all day like small sails are folded and stacked in threes, their painted mon resting face to face as if conferring. The taller nobori poles are walked to the gate mouth and set in sleeves tamped firm with heel and mallet. Each crest finds its distance from the next, so shapes will read at night. 3 oak leaves on white, a wheel of 6 spokes on indigo, a climbing vine in thin black strokes that still look patient after a march. Ropes, hemp with a good memory, run from guy post to guy post, and are drawn snug without temper, knots flattened with a thumb so morning fingers will know exactly where to begin. A clerk steps back and checks the line of the banners the way a gardener checks trees after wind. He nudges a pole by the width of a grain of rice, and the row becomes honest. At ground level, the lanes explain themselves. The camp is laid in a grid you can walk with your eyes closed once you learn the measure. Carts to the rear on hard ground. Mess to the left of the main way so steam will drift away from orders. Picket lines downwind of the powder gourd shed for reasons the shed never argues. A rake undercuts the last grass tufts. A broom writes long, parallel strokes that speak of morning rather than of today. At intervals, a bucket is set with its handle turned inward to face the work it serves. A boy with a ledger of posts marks the wells that were capped at noon and the ones that must be checked again before the lamp is lowered. He writes the note in a small, neat hand and leaves enough room for a seal that will be pressed later when the day has decided to be complete. Where the road enters the camp, a strip of clean straw is laid so sandals will learn to shed the outside while feet still remember it. Steel and lacquer arrive with quieter voices than they used at dawn. Kabuto helmets come off by habit and sit on stands like patient mushrooms. Cords are unlooked, laid flat, and counted by touch alone. Minpo face guards, their fierce mustaches only paint and leather in this light, are wiped along the jawline where breath found them, then set to one side to consider the brazier. The dew chest plate yields to 2 fingers at the hinge. Kusazuri lames loosen their swing and show the honest scuffs of brush and thorn that taught them humility before the enemy had a chance. Kote sleeves, high-date thigh guards, Sunny 8 shin plates. Each goes to its accustomed corner on the mat, always in the order that makes tomorrow faster without belonging to hurry. A small bottle of oil answers a cloth with the faintest shine, more proof against weather than pride. No one tells the armor to sleep. It remembers. Lanterns learn their smaller ovals while the map table finds its weight. For flat stones claim the corners, so paper will accept the night's slow air without curling its opinions. A brush lays down the ridge lines the scout recited, and a tiny mark notes where a ford is honest at chest height and treacherous at the hip. A second brush adds villages as pale squares with names quiet enough not to wake. A third draws a rope across a section of road to remind mourning hands that a bridge here will want men and not hope. Seals are pressed, red as persimmon, where a list has ceased to be merely possible and has become the promise of an action. The clerk dries the paste with a breath over sand, then wraps the seal again in its cloth so it will not learn to leave its face where it does not belong. Between brushstrokes, a kettle gives one sound and decides it is set enough. Rations are counted using old containers that have been around longer than these guys. A boy brings in a wooden tub and sets it down gently, like he's sharing a secret. The clerk grabs a bronze scoop next to the rice chest, calling it by its size. Go. A little measure that fits in one hand. 10 of these make a show, and 10 show equal a koku, which promises a year's worth of food for one hungry person if the weather plays nice. He takes his time measuring. 1, 2, 3. The grains flow softly, like dry rain hitting a roof. Each scoop levels itself by sound, not sight. The sack's mouth ties up neatly with a twist that a cold hand can easily untie at dawn. A narrow brush tracks the details. 2 show for line 3, go for the watch at the south path, and the page accepts it like a bull takes in water. All the while, the camp gate practices the sentence it will say when the quarter is ready to sleep. 2 posts lean a degree inward and then straighten, as if hearing a correction from a man they respect. A bar is lifted, weighed in the hands, and set back where it was, so that iron will remember certainty without needing to be told later in the dark. A runner comes past, quiet as straw, with a bundle of sashimono stitched by the woman whose shoulder aches in rain. He places them by the clerk with the care given to scrolls and bows with the care given to ladders. From somewhere beyond the curtain, a Konkorogai sends a round note that finds the edge of the camp and sits there like a stone in shallow water. It is not a call to arms. It is the first chapter of a night that will be kept by order. Cords flat, knots square, lanes brushed, lamps modest. The road, having delivered its load of footsteps, folds into the dark at the margins, and the camp, newly drawn, newly named, takes its first long breath. The camp's quiet has its own office, and it begins with paper the color of steamed grain and a brush that understands weight. A quartermaster folds his sleeves, leans into the lamplight, and wakes the ink with slow circles that darken from rain to river, river to night. The ledger opens with the soft persuasion of cloth over wood. Columns stand ready like lanes raked straight. Names arrive not as boasts, but as measurements of care. Unit, cart, mule, sack, bundle. The brush lands and lifts with small bows that keep the page honest. Beside his hand, a shallow dish of cinnabar waits for seals. A square of sand waits to steady what is wet. The soroban lays out its beads the way a season lays out its hours. 5 gather, 2 release, 10 accept. The clicks are the camp's heartbeat now that the drums have gone to sleep. Rations are counted using old containers that have been around longer than these guys. A boy brings in a wooden tub and sets it down gently, like he's sharing a secret. The clerk grabs a bronze scoop next to the rice chest, calling it by its size. Go. A little measure that fits in one hand. 10 of these make a show, and 10 show equal a koku, which promises a year's worth of food for one hungry person if the weather plays nice. He takes his time measuring. 1, 2, 3. The grains flow softly, like dry rain hitting a roof. Each scoop levels itself by sound, not sight. The sack's mouth ties up neatly with a twist that a cold hand can easily untie at dawn. A narrow brush tracks the details. 2 show for line 3, go for the watch at the south path, and the page accepts it like a bull takes in water. Around him, foodstuffs wait with the patience of winter. Miso keeps its deep quiet under a lid weighted by a river stone that remembers its river. Omebashi, pickled plums the color of old sunsets, sit in a jar with their own weather. A single fruit moved to a small dish scents the air like a memory that refuses drama. Dried fish sleep on a tray wrapped in paper that crackles exactly once when touched. Daikon hangs in pairs from a beam, string biting their necks just enough to teach them the size they must keep through the night. Salt sacks lean against each other like elders waiting for a cart. The clerk considers portions with the arithmetic of kindness, enough to hold back harshness, not so much that the morning forgets it has work to do. He lifts a lid, inhales a thought of the sea, and writes 1 ladle miso beside the rice line, as if adding a soft blanket to a thin bed. The stores are not only for mouths. Fire wants its proofs, charcoal in stout baskets, each marked with a stroke in the ledger and a finger pressed into the dust to remember which pile came from which wagon. Firewood split straight, ends squared so stacks will not tilt toward mischief. Bucket after bucket with hoops checked and handles turned inward to face the work they serve. Ropes hang by their thickness like a choir arranged by pitch. The coarser coils wait for carts, the finer for banners and netting. Stakes live in bundles of 20 with 1 extra on purpose, because the ground likes to ask questions at the wrong time. The quartermaster runs a thumb along a rope's lay to see if it has learned a bad habit. He turns the end under and ties a whipping to keep order from unraveling. His brush writes rope, fine hemp, 3 coils to standards. The soroban approves with 1 small click, and the oil in the lamp lowers itself a finger's width to match the reduced need for flame. Arrows and iron call for their own attention. You are kept in bundles wrapped with leather ties, 6 fletched, and 6 more waiting to learn feathers in the morning. Each bundle is counted by touch and set in a rack that leans a degree away from ambition. Arrowheads live in a chest that smells of oil and iron. They are bagged by tins, so hands can find numbers by feel in the dark. Bowstrings, spare, coiled, unwilling to surprise anyone, are tucked into a drawer lined with cotton that will not teach them kinks. For the gun crew, he opens the powder chest, as if waking a child who must not startle. Lids lift. Corks give a soft consent. Powder gourds are weighed in his palm, and then weighed again in his mind. Hinawa slow match is trimmed to a patient gray and coiled in paper with a crease that knows how to open without tearing. Lead balls are counted to a shallow tray, not by clatter, but by the light wooden talk of one circle greeting another. He writes powder checked, gourds faced inward, and presses the red seal where the line ceases to be a hope and becomes a promise. Tools that serve the mouth and tools that serve the map each receive their lines. A kettle earns a note about the fit of its lid. A ladle learns its place across the rim of a water jar, so a sleepy hand will find it where a sleepy hand expects. A whetstone is dampened and set back to the exact angle it prefers. Inkstones are washed to clear, then tipped to sleep under cloth. Brushes are pinched to neat points and rolled into their bamboo sleeves. Seals rest face up so no paste will wander. The paste itself closes with its faint plum smell inside. A square of paper is cut for repairs and tucked under the ledger's cord. Hinge on the north chest wants oil. Latch on the powder shed likes a new peg. Wool 3 on the map wagon creaks when it grows proud. The quartermaster does not raise his voice to the page. He gives it facts in a tone that even a hinge can believe. Outside the store tent, order continues in things that never ask for credit. The grain chest has its iron corners turned inward to face the work. The sack rack keeps a finger of air between every burlap shoulder, so damp we'll have no excuse to sit down. A boy in a patched jacket carries a scoop to the far line and returns the scoop to the hook with the handle pointing left because the man who reaches with his right prefers it so. A runner brings a chit from the watch captain, one show of rice for men cycling off the north picket, and a little salt, and 2 slices of dried radish to convince the stomach it is seen. The quartermaster nods once, fills the measure twice, folds the paper packet with a pinch that will not open on the path, and marks the ledger issued. He does not write enough beside it. The neatness of the line already says so. By the lamp the page grows into evening. Columns that were empty at dusk now were totals that sit without wobble. Received stands opposite issued like 2 hands at the same table. The sum beneath them is smaller than morning's number and better. Where a sack corner showed more where than a corner should, the note rebag tomorrow appears in a small hand. Where a basket split once and learned humility, the note new hoop settles beside it. The Sorbonne beads idle at their corners, content as stones in a stream bed. The clerk fans the ledger once so the spine will not grow proud, then lays a cloth across the open page as a roof lays snow across a courtyard, lightly, without sermon, purely to keep what is needed dry. When he is finished, he closes the book with both hands, not as an owner, but as a guest who knows how to shut a door that is not his. The cords tie in a square knot that lies flat and can be untied by fingers that have been out in weather. The seal box goes to the back of the drawer, so the morning will have to mean it to reach it. The key hangs from its hook with its iron tongue turned toward the room it keeps. He looks once more along the racks, sacks aligned to their marks on the rail, lids seated, ropes quiet, gourds with their corks faced inward politely. He lowers the wick until the lamp becomes a seed of light, and then a thought of light, and then a lesson remembered. Outside, the watch passes with 2 wooden clacks that carry like a promise. The stores breathe out. The camp, supplied without spectacle, rests a little deeper on the earth, and your own breath can match the arithmetic it has just learned. Steady in, steady out. While rice waits in its chest, powder in its gourds, ropes on their pegs, and the night keeps its patient count. The camp takes care of its feet before it thinks about sleep. At the edge of each tent, a low rack waits with the patience of wood that knows how many miles live in a day. Waraji straw sandals come home heel to toe. The cords remember ankles. The sawls carry a map in dust and dried mud. A boy with a damp cloth walks the lower slats and clears the ghost of footprints so tomorrow will not inherit anybody's hurry. He keeps to one rule: left to right, then back again. Not because a rule book said so, but because the rack looks relieved when order returns. A bundle of spare cords lies on the top rail. The ends are wrapped, so they will not teach themselves to fray in the night. Inside the tents, tabi are set to remember their shape. Pairs that walk far are turned mouth up on a rope line, so air can write a clean sentence through the toes. The heel seam is checked with 2 fingers. If a thread has decided to forget its duty, a needle is threaded and the memory put back before the forgetting spreads. A shallow basin receives the pairs that need water's advice. Rinse. Press. No wringing. Cotton does better when persuaded than when scolded. The toe caps meet a sliver of soap and return to their white. Each pair is carried to a cross pole where night drafts are polite and lantern light cannot teach yellow. The wooden pegs take the weight with a small tick that sounds like a promise kept. Corridors of earth are given back to morning one line at a time. A broom of stiff millet stands taller than the boy who guides it, yet it behaves like a pen in a steady hand. He pushes with the grain of the packed dirt, not across it, so the lane will not begin the day with a grudge. Dust does not fly. It agrees to be gathered. Where the ground changes to laid mats at the commander's tent, the tool changes too. A wide hake brush draws slow, even lanes, so the weave will lie with the same mind it had when it was new. At thresholds, the strokes shorten and lighten. Edges do not like to be bullied. A dustpan accepts what the hour has brought. The pile is small, the kind of small that comes from many quiet obediences practiced since noon. The camp looks like a little oasis with water in bowls everywhere. By each post, there's a lidded bucket with a ladle resting on top. Both got a good scrub last week and again tonight because, habits love company. Someone dips the ladle and splashes the path, making it just wet enough so the night doesn't drag dirt into your dreams. In town, they have a name for this act, but here, it's just a kind gesture for tired feet. The boy carefully sets the ladle back, making sure it lies flat against the bucket. Over in the yard, a covered well sits nice and neat, with the rope coiled up so it won't get tangled in the dark. Nearby, a clean note on a board says buckets checked, lids replaced, and south gutter cleared. It's not just for looks. It's how this camp keeps its promises alive. Racks ask for their last attention. A senior orderly walks the line and sees at once where a pair has been placed a thumb's width shy of true. His hand corrects what a spirit level would miss and what a sore back would feel in the morning. He pats the shelf the way one pats a shoulder. A smaller boy returns with a cloth that carries a breath of oil. He follows the grain and lifts only what must be lifted. The rails take on a quiet shine that does not argue with dust. In the corners, the broom goes back to the wall with its bristles combed straight and its handle turned inward. Tools, like people, are calmer when they face the work they serve. A coil of spare cord is set on the lowest slat where the sleepy hand will find it without a thought. Even sound learns to be useful. In one long lane, the broom strokes set the pace. A slow 3 you can count with breath. In another, a bucket is put down on a folded cloth so the earth will not learn dents. From the far edge of camp, the night watch lets the Hayashiji speak twice and then closes his hands on the blocks so no echo will go wandering. A kettle near a brazier gives one breath and then returns to listening. When a door flap is tested, it answers with a vowel, never a hard consonant. A peg is tapped home and chooses not to brag about it. The ground seems to like this grammar. It holds the lines. It keeps the dust. It forgets the boots. By the time the work reaches the outer stakes, the camp is lighter by the weight of dirt and heavier by the weight of promise. Shelves are square. Racks are true. Water sits where water belongs. The last pass of the brush draws a straight lane and stops at the exact peg where the boy began. He looks back, not to admire, only to confirm that evening has been set down in the order morning will prefer. He folds the cloth into quarters and then into quarters again. Corners meet like good neighbors. A lantern is lowered a finger width so flame and cloth will not start a talk. They cannot keep civil. The air cools by a degree. Somewhere a runner ties a knot flat and sets his sandals heel to toe. The lanes shine the way a conscience does when it has done simple things well. The camp, feet bathed and put away, is ready to lie still and learn the dark. The day leaves the warriors at the collar first. Hands reach behind the neck for the knot they could tie in darkness, and the cord eases. The kabuto lifts with a small sigh of straps and breath, and the body remembers how light feels across the shoulders. A stand waits, a simple wooden kabuto cake, and the helmet learns its place on the post. The neck plates, the shikoro, relax their slight curve and settle like a well-trained curtain. A cloth that smells faintly of camellia oil touches the visor and the side flares. Dust from road and brush answers the cloth and decides it will not be part of tomorrow. The crest on the brow, bold at dawn, is now only shape. The lamplight makes it a polite outline and nothing more. Face guards return from their work to their ordinary selves. A minpo that wore a mustache painted in careful strokes is set on a folded pad so lacquer will not learn scratches. The Yoder cake throat lames are wiped along each rim until the edge forgets grit. The padding on the inside, dark with use, is pressed with 2 fingers to check that the fill has not bunched. Straps that met behind the head are laid flat and counted by touch. 1, 2, 3, each the right length, each without a weak place where a knot once lived. A tray holds the pins and ties in families, small pieces nested where a sleepy hand can find them at dawn without speaking. The chest learns to open. The dew unhooks under the arm where the hinge answers without a fight. Plates loosen along the ribs, and the kusazuri skirt shows the little scars it earned from brush, earth, and stairs. Each mark is honest. The lacquer wakes under a barely oiled cloth and turns from dry to calm. Lacing, the odoshi, runs and rows the way a careful field runs, and any thread that tried to rise is smoothed back into the village. A buckle that learned pride during rain is corrected with a thumb and a small breath. The inside shows the day's salt. A cloth folded into a neat square lifts it away and leaves only the promise that the body will not borrow yesterday's work. Arms and legs follow the same manners. Kote sleeves come off in a practiced roll so plates and mail will not bite the skin. The cords are set down in the same order every evening. Cuffs to elbows to shoulder ties, each kept from twisting by a half turn laid flat on the mat. Sodi shoulder guards are stacked with their curves pointing the same way, top to top, bottom to bottom, so a hand can lift them tomorrow without thinking which side is forward. High-date thigh guards give up their weight, and the straps breathe straight again. Sunny 8 on the shins let go of the calf, and the buckles are placed with the prong faced inward so leather will not learn to warp by night. Every part that listens is rewarded by being left alone. Underlayers begin to tell the real story of comfort. The sweat dark line at the collar of the shiitake is dabbed with water and pressed between cloths. Kaihan leg wraps are untied by feel and smoothed along their length so the weave will not learn bad memory. A padded jacket that met the plates all day is turned inside out and hung near a draft that does not bite. The air writes a small kindness through the fabric. A spare set is brought forward for the morning. It waits in a clean square with its ties looped over 2 fingers, ready to be a simple answer when the horn calls the next light. Buckles, hinges, and cords receive their inspection in the same slow order every night. A finger walks each edge and stops where a plate has learned to rub. A drop of oil teaches peace. A hinge that used to speak and win now prefers to be quiet. Lacing near the hip is checked for the first word of fray. If the word is there, a needle is threaded, and the line is corrected while the cloth still knows where it belongs. Nothing is left to discover morning. Discovery is for scouts and rivers, not for straps. The stands take what the bodies give up. Yoroi cake frames hold dew and kusazuri with a width that tells plates not to learn the wrong bend. Helmets line a shelf like dark moons, each on its post, each turned so the crest faces away from flame. Masks rest in a row where a hand can choose one without waking the lot. A mat under the gear stays clean because a brush learned its long strokes before the pile began. On that mat sit a small bottle of oil, a square of paper for notes, a little pouch with spare cord, and a pin cushion with 3 needles that do not wander. These things do not make speeches. They are only the presence of order. Weapons that share the tent are allowed to be present without being loud. A bow with its string relieved lies along a low rack with a cloth over its belly. A quiver sits with its mouth covered, fletchings quiet, heads wrapped in leather that does not show its name. A sword rests in its scabbard under a fold of the padded jacket, so the lacquer will not meet the cold floor. No edge is handled. No polish is begun. Only the small promises are kept. The mouth of the oil bottle is wiped. The cord ends are tied off square and flat. The lid of the chest is closed with both hands and learns to sit without a clack. Around this work, the sound of the tent has its own way to breathe. A kettle on a low brazier gives one short word and stops. A brush on lacquer makes the soft noise of rain that has changed its mind. A plank under a stand answers a shift with a tone that is wood and not complaint. Outside, someone walks past on tamped earth and the steps count a patient 4. From the stores a voice carries a number and then chooses to keep the rest. The horn is silent. The drum is a memory. The watch is the only part of the camp that speaks, and it speaks with wood once in a while and not to you. When everything that takes a strap or a tie has been taught to rest, the space itself looks easier. Helmets are not fierce. Masks are not faces. Plates are not weight. They are shapes that will be useful again when the lamp grows stronger. The mat is tidy from left to right and from near edge to far. The cloths are folded into halves, then into halves again, corners meeting in a square that will please a morning hand. The oil bottle sits with its cork faced inward. The needles lie like little reeds across the pin rest. The note on the paper is short. Right shoulder lace will want watching. The rest is fine. Before the lamp is lowered, the men who live in the armor stretch their hands and let them hang. The wrists learn the size of air without cord. The shoulders learn their height without plate. The back forgets the curve that the breast took and keeps only the shape of breathing. Someone lifts the stand by an inch to spare a knot in the mat. Someone turns a mask so the strap will not remember strain. Someone laughs once, not to entertain, only because the body will sometimes thank itself out loud. Then the wick is pinched to a smaller oval. The tent takes on the color of sleep. Outside, the lane keeps its straight brush lines in the low light. Inside, the gear that made a wall of sound at dawn now makes a wall of quiet. The night can begin to hold the camp, and you can let your own shoulders learn the same lesson. In slowly, out a little longer. The plates will wait. The straps will wait. Morning knows where to find them. The gun crew chooses a place where heat behaves. A low brazier glows the color of persimmon, and a kettle keeps a single quiet breath. Mats are laid so knees will not learn the ground's chill. Racks are staked in firm soil, tilted a finger's width, so any night damp will remember to travel. Each tanegashima is set down as if it were a sleeping animal that must not be startled. Wood stocks show the long polish of hands and weather. Iron wears its dark calm. The men speak in the grammar of small nods and short answers. It is not the hour for pride. It is the hour for tools that will need to wake at dawn to be allowed to sleep first. A senior gunner loosens the jaw that held the match and lifts the serpentine arm to feel its hinge. His thumb walks the curve and stops where a season once taught rust. A drop of oil is invited to remember the lesson. The barrel is looked through the way one looks down a quiet well. He does not hurry. He does not ask for shine. He asks for honesty. A swab passes once, then once again, steady as breath, until the cloth comes away with the day returned to it. No one talks about accuracy. They talk about kindness, which is the other word for a boar that will not argue in the morning. When the cloth is folded and set aside, the metal keeps a low idea of light and nothing more. Nearby, a younger pair works in mirror. One steadies, one checks. The pan covers slide and learn their seats. Screws that agreed to stay home at noon are asked whether they still prefer that truth. Threads are not forced. They are persuaded with fingertips that know the difference between stubborn and sure. When a piece is set back, the hand lingers the length of a slow blink, because a blink is long enough for a tool to confess a fault if it has one. A strip of paper receives the smallest notes in a neat hand. Mouth of gourd A fits best to lock B. Left jaw prefers a thin wrap of cord. The paper is folded and tucked into the pouch where the hand that wrote it will find it without waking anyone. Match cord is the camp's small fire tamed to a string. Hinawa is brought out of its box and weighed in the palm, not for number or pride, but for feel. Damp is the camp's old adversary. A coil is lifted to the brazier's neighborhood, no closer than a breath that does not warm the lip of the kettle. The thread is trimmed with the same care given to a bowstring and laid in a loose loop so a sleepy hand could free it in darkness. A short length is tested in the air above the embers. It answers by smoldering like a patient moth and then is pinched quiet. The crew nods once. No bravado. The cord is returned to its paper sleeve with the fold that always opens kindly. Powder and shot are present without becoming conversation. Gourds are uncorked only long enough to ask whether the stoppers still love their seats. They do. The stoppers face inward again. A tray accepts round, lead like a shore accepts small stones. One counts, another listens. They count by touch because numbers learned in the fingers go where eyes cannot. A small brush clears a line of dust from a sight that never boasted even when the sun made it glitter. The brush returns to its roll. The tray is covered. The gourd mouths are still. A boy who runs errands hovers at the edge of the circle and learns that sometimes the best way to help is to be a place for a tool to rest for a moment and nothing else. The brazier keeps its vow. Ash is walked over coals until heat remembers to be neighborly. A kettle's lid is rotated one finger's width to settle steam. Now and then a sleeve lifts and turns a gun by the length of a breath, so one patch of iron will not own all the evening's warmth. No spark sleep. No crackle tries to write a story where a list belongs. The camp outside is all swept lanes and dim lamps. Inside this little ring of light, there is water where water belongs and iron where iron belongs. A ladle lies across a jar. The handle points the way a sleepy hand expects. That is the difference between calm and trouble at this hour, and everyone here has lived long enough to prefer calm. Wood asks for its portion of care. Stalks are rubbed with a cloth that carries a thought of oil and the memory of hands that carved them. The grain wakes the way a field wakes when wind chooses to pass across it and not through it. A chip at the butt is named to the paper strip, not to scold the day, but to make the morning honest. Sling cords are checked for the first word of a fray. If the word is there, a new word is taught with a knot whose ends lie flat and do not boast. Brass fittings accept a thumb's encouragement and then are left alone. Everything that is tightened to the size of breath, never to the size of anger. When pieces return to their places, the rack looks like a tidy sentence. Barrels aligned, stocks true, cords asleep. A palm travels the row as a lantern travels a wall. The senior gunner stops once at a lock and listens with his fingertip. The hinge answers with a vowel, not a consonant. The difference is the whole reason for evenings like this. He nods and moves on. Two lads pack away the tools in an order that would make sense to a stranger. Cloth, brush roll, oil, cord, paper, seal. The box closes with the soft persuasion of wood that likes its own joints. The key finds its hook. The hands that worked now belong to bodies again. Outside the tent mouth, the night watch lets the blocks talk twice and then puts them to bed against his chest. A temple bell many miles away lowers a round note onto roofs that are not here and still somehow approve. In the next lane, someone teaches a lamp a smaller oval. A horse shifts his weight as if remembering a better pasture and then remembers that it is night. The gun crew sit back on their heels and let their shoulders tell them about the day and then stop telling. No man here explains his craft to the dark. He breathes and lets the dark explain itself. Before the lamp is pinched lower, the senior lays his hand flat on the nearest stock and leaves it there the count of 3 breaths. It is not a ritual so much as a line drawn under a column of figures. Enough done, enough promised, enough left for morning, and no more. The wick becomes a small seed of light. The brazier sulks into ash. The kettle keeps one syllable and then none. Outside, banners have become ideas. Inside, iron, and would have become neighbors who do not need to speak. If you are listening from your bed, you can borrow the crew's arithmetic now. In slowly, as a swab enters a barrel. Out a little longer, as ash settles over coal. Tools rest. Shoulders rest. The camp keeps watch without asking you to. Smoke learns to be food before it forgets to be smoke. At the mess fire, a black iron comma sits steady on a ring of stones. Lid tilted of fingers so steam can speak without argument. The rice inside is counted truth, measured earlier by go and show, rinsed until the water ran clear, then left to remember the grain it wanted to be. A hand lifts the lid, and the camp receives a soft cloud that smells like work deciding to rest. The paddle, a broad shimoji, slides under and turns the rice from the bottom, so heat will be honest from rim to heart. No scrape, no rush, only the patient lift that keeps each grain whole. The rice moves to a warm wooden ohitsu tub, the lid settles, and the sound of steam grows quiet as a thought that now knows where to sit. Beside it, a pot the color of old iron wakes a deeper note. Miso has been eased thin with water, stirred until the paste becomes a broth that knows the hour. Slivers of daikon have learned a little softness. A few leaves that can spare themselves float once and then give up their green to the bowl. The cook tastes with a pinch of fingers and air, and a small nod travels his shoulders. Salt from the coast. Beans worked and kept through a year that was not simple, fire persuaded into neighborly heat. The ladle rests a breath on the rim, and the rim accepts the weight because the pot and the hand have spoken this language together many nights. Lines form the way brush lanes form on a swept path. A shigaroo come first, cups and bowls nested against their belts. Faces that carried sun all day, now carrying the color of lamp smoke. Officers wait without speaking about it. The ladle finds bowls in a rhythm that does not pretend to be music and still is. Rice a measured scoop, soup a measured scoop, a pickled plum omebashi the size of a coin set to one side, like a small red moon. A strip of dried fish goes to the men coming off the North Watch. A second strip goes to the runners who have not sat since noon. No one needs to say the words for fairness. They live in the arm that pours. A low table holds what the tongue remembers from home. Pickles cut thin enough to fold light. A dish of sesame and salt to remind plainness that it is welcome. 3 dried persimmons for the men who carried messages across 2 ridges before dusk. Each thing keeps its size. Each thing knows why it is here. Hands bow over bowls before the first mouthful, not as ceremony to be admired, but as a hinge that allows the body to open and receive. When wooden chopsticks rest, their tips point inward. When talk happens, it happens under breath and moves no farther than the width of a sleeve. Water has its own ration and its own dignity. A jar with a lidded mouth stands under a cloth, so dust will not think of joining. The hishako ladle lies across the lid where a sleepy hand expects it. A cup is filled, then a second for the man who has been tending fires since the road ended. No one drinks the jar down to the echo. Enough is a number learned by years, and the jar is left with that number inside it. A boy tips a second bucket across the lane, so the ground will not lift dust into the bowls of men who have already eaten. The ground darkens a little and then remembers itself. Tea arrives not as a ceremony, but as a kindness done correctly. Leaves breathe once in a warm pot. Cups are warmed and emptied so lips will not be surprised. The pour is even across 4 cups, then even across 4 more. A thin steam writes a character in the air and forgets it before it reaches the shoji of the commander's tent. The taste is grass and smoke and the end of a day that did not win or lose everything. The cup warms the palm. The throat answers without needing a story. When each cup is finished, it turns mouth down on a cloth and waits for a rinse that is all the way clean without making wet where wet should not be. The mess teaches silence to be useful. A drop lid does not clap. A laugh rolls once and folds back into the body it came from. A boy clacks 2 bowls together softly and learns the look that means listen to the hour. Far off, the Horigai contests a single low note to prove the shell still remembers the sea. The note travels the length of the camp and sits down. Between tints, someone reads the watchbill back in a voice that does not wake a sleeping horse. Between breaths, a kettle edits its own enthusiasm to a small, steady sound the way a man edits a letter until only the needed words remain. Bowls clean. The room makes ready for tomorrow while hands still remember how to be careful. Rice is shaped into onigiri for the men who will walk before light. Salted hands press triangles that will feel like a promise when the ridge wind argues at dawn. A strip of nori waits folded between cloth so it will not learn limpness where crispness is useful. A runner stows 2 cakes and a pickled plum in a pouch that will find his palm by touch alone. The cook writes a small note on scrap. North Pickett receives first portion at first bell. He places the note where the quartermaster's eye will meet it as if it were his own idea. Clean returns to the tools. The paddle is dipped, wiped, and laid with the handle to the left because the man who will lift it in the morning lifts with his left. The pot rims are rubbed where ladles rested and where fire left a finger of soot. The ladle's bowl is turned toward air and not toward iron, so moisture will not argue with rust. A tray catches 3 grains of rice and 1 scrap of daikon and takes them politely out into the dark. Floor mats are brushed with strokes that face the door. Ash is walked over the brazier until coals learn modesty and stay learned. When the last bowl is stacked and the last cup is set mouth down, the mess becomes air again. The lamp lowers its oval by a finger. Steam chooses not to be seen anymore. Men who ate early drift to their posts with shoulders that have decided not to carry what they do not need tonight. Men who will sleep soon let the taste of tea measure the length of one breath, and then another. Somewhere a horse chooses a new hoof to rest, and does not make a case about it. Somewhere a banner chooses a new angle, and does not ask for witness. If you are listening from your bed, you can borrow the camp's arithmetic. In softly, the way rice moves from pot to tub. Out a little longer, the way steam leaves a cup and does not return. Let the jaw loosen as if the cord at the back of a helmet had just been lifted. Let the hands settle the way a paddle settles across its bowl. Food has been counted. Water has been respected. Fire has been taught its size. The night keeps watch. You are allowed to close your eyes. The commander's tent has its own weather at this hour. Canvas walls hold a steady breath. A low lamp draws a small oval on a table made wide by plank and rope. For stones teach the map to stay humble. Each stone knows which ridge it is asked to be. A brush wakes in the ink with slow circles. Water turns from clear to gray and then to night. The scout repeats what his feet learned at dusk. Creak to the knee at the first crossing. Thigh to the second. The ford moves a little after rain. The brush makes a thin line for water and a thicker one for the bank. It pauses where the scout paused and sets a dot shaped like a footprint. The paper accepts this without pride. Names arrive with care rather than noise. Villages are written in a small hand that does not wake the lamp. The brush plants a square where a mill turns. A triangle marks a shrine that can guide the lost if the sky refuses stars. A circle means a store hut that was full last season and may still be patient. Hills become long backs with their spines facing the wind. Trails become threads that tangle less if you keep your thumb on one end. The scout points once with a reed. He speaks once. Then he lets the brush speak the rest. A clerk sits beside the table and murmurs the words for the record. Meadow, narrow road, watch post without fire. He sets each on a clean line as if laying chopsticks in order. The lists are another kind of map. A mokoroku is spread on a board to the left. It is a plain page that turns men and things into rows. Arrows and bundles are counted by touch. Bowstrings that were slackened after sunset are named. Powder gourds are noted as faced inward with corks remembered. Rations for the first light march are marked down to show and go. The quartermaster's hand is the same steady width for every figure. When the total reaches the bottom, he leaves a space for the seal and a breath for the sand to drink the red. He does not write flourish. He writes enough. Orders are copied in a script that has made peace with speed. A senior writes the first version. A younger hand writes the twins that will travel in opposite directions before dawn. Lamps are trimmed so the paper will not brown. The words for the watch rotate along the top margin like stars that know where to be. North outer, south outer, river bend, gate mouth. The countersign is written last, so no, I will meet it by accident. It is a plain word that sounds like something the weather might say. The slips are folded twice along old crease lines and tied with soft cord that knows how to open without temper. Each knot lies flat, so a sleepy hand will not bruise it. Seals are like the camp's quiet trumpets. The cinnabar paste opens up with a scent that reminds you of old fruit. The stone gets pressed onto the pad and then onto the page, leaving a mark that doesn't shout but confidently sits there, red and bright, like a little sun telling the time. The clerk scoops up some sand with a shallow tray, letting a light rain fall so nothing smudges what was promised. He closes the paste, wipes the lid, and sets the seal down to rest. The box slides into a drawer that smells of cedar and patience, while the key finds its place, ready for the next moment. Outside the table of paper, signals learn their own small posture. A drum head is tightened to the pitch the knight prefers, and then covered so no stray hand can argue with it. The conch horn, the horagai, is tested with a breath that stops before the shell remembers pride. Rope signals are coiled and hung where a hand that knows them can find them without looking. A runner reads the watch bill back to the captain, and the captain reads it back to the runner. The words travel softly and return the same. No one raises a voice to prove a point. The point is proven by the order of the words and by the calm of the air around them. Weather is written where it can be seen in the morning. A page notes wind from the west at dusk. Dew on the cords before nightfall. Low cloud that may bleed at first light. The stream was quiet at the ford. The horse pickets faced the same way without fuss. Men coughed less after tea than before. The brush sets these things down as if they were numbers. The page grows into a gentle ledger of sky and ground. A thin cord ties it to the front of the map chest, so a sleepy hand will not put it where the day cannot find it. The chest lid is taught to close with both hands and not to clap. The general's corner breathes like a quieter room inside this room. A cup is set on the map edge with its mouth down, so no sleeve will tip it. A second map, older and more certain about hills, rests under a cloth. Weights are stones that once kept down a fishing net. Their edges are smooth where water argued and was patient. The general listens to the last scout, and then listens to the silence after him. He looks at the lanes between tents where the brush passed earlier. He looks at the lamp and decides it will be smaller in a moment. He says what will happen before light in a voice that allows sleep to keep most of the hour. When the copying is finished, the table becomes clean again. Brushes are rinsed until the water runs pale. Hairs are pinched to points and laid across their ceramic rest like cranes over reeds. The inkstone is wiped and turned away from the lamp so it will not learn to dry too quickly. Orders are placed in the hands that must carry them. A palm tests each knot. A thumb tests each seal. The runners bow and become parts of the dark. The watch captain lifts the bill and reads it one more time, and then puts it down as if putting a child to bed. The lamp learns a smaller oval. The stones keep their corners. The map breathes the way a sleeping chest breathes. Outside the canvas, the camp holds the rhythm it learned tonight. Lanes brushed straight keep their shine like thoughts that have finished. Banners have become ideas rather than cloth. A kettle far off edits its sound to one steady note, and then none. The conch does not speak. The drum does not remember its own voice. Only the blocks of the watch knock twice in the distance, and then rest against a chest, so the echo will not grow teeth. If you are listening from your pillow, you can take your measure from this room. In softly, as a brush lands on paper. Out a little longer, as ink settles to matte. Orders will wait on their cords. Stones will keep the corners. Morning knows where to find the lines. Sleep is allowed to arrive before it does. Night learns its lanes first, then its keepers. The camp grid that marched here in daylight now lowers its voice and assigns corners to ears more than to eyes. A cord in the commander's tent hangs a simple board where posts are named from north to river bend. The watch bill, copied twice at the map table, is read again in a voice that would not wake a horse. Names answer with a nod that belongs to the body rather than the mouth. The countersign is given last, a plain word chosen to sit quietly in the teeth. It is said once to each man and not again. A folded slip holds the same word in brushwork for the captain only. He tucks it where his fingers will find it without looking and where rain cannot. Signals that shout in daylight learn to whisper at night. The drum is tuned just right, wrapped in a cloth that keeps secrets. No need to raise alarms tonight. It's all about marking the time and calling back a relief that forgot the clock in its bones. The conch, or horagai, gets a careful breath. The note rings out, low and round, then is tucked away so the shell won't get too proud. Rope signals are coiled and hung up where the same hands that placed them in the last valley will find them here again. Wooden clappers, or hayashiji, rest under the arm of the watchman, who knows better than to chase his own echo. He lets them sound twice at the top of the hour and once at the half, then holds them close so the air can forget what was said. It's all about keeping the rhythm, you know? Fire learns humility all along the edge. Lanterns at gates are pinched until their ovals are no larger than a coin. Wicks are trimmed so flame will sit down and not climb. Brazier embers are walked under ash with tongs that do not hurry. A path of bare earth is raked between tents and cook pits to teach sparks where they are not allowed to go. Buckets stand in pairs with handles turned inward to face the work. Lids rest on jars where water waits. The boy who checks the line speaks only to lids and hoops. He taps the wood. It replies with the small answer of things ready to do a simple job in the dark. No one tells the firebreak it did well. The ground knows it by feel, by the way the soles of sandals do not lift ash. Ears listen to what the eyes see. A horse shifts, a strap responds to leather, and a kettle momentarily forgets itself until a lid brings it back. A rope talks to its pole, while a boot that didn't lift high enough at a threshold learns its lesson on wood. Water sits just where it always does, on the other side of the rope, practicing the same simple drops and sounds it's been doing since the last ring. In the distance, a temple bell from another province adds a weight to unseen roofs. None of these sounds are enemies. The watch picks them up so quickly that the mind starts to see them as part of the furniture. Everything else stands on its own. Metal is persuaded to stop being bright. A boss on a helmet that caught the last light is wrapped in a strip of cloth so it will not catch the first. Buckles turn inward. Knife backs face the skin. Rings that like to talk and stride are corrected with a wrap of thread. Even the iron that sleeps, hinges, hooks, buckles, receives a finger's walk and a promise to speak only vowels tonight. At the crossings, men speak the countersign like a kindness. The answer comes back like a coin placed on a table. Heard, understood, enough. If the word refuses to arrive, the point of a spear is not the next thing. The next thing is stillness, then the call to the nearest post, then the captain. Order is faster than fear when it has been taught all day. The gate rehearses its own manner. Bars lift and sit without a thud. Hinges try a breath and choose to hold it. The leaves lean in and then stand straight, as if they remember a teacher's palm against the frame. A lantern behind the shoulder paints the ground and not the men. A list near the jamb reminds the hand that reaches for iron which order it prefers. Lock, bar, latch. Latch, bar, lock. The man at the gate looks out not to chase shadows, but to name the things that are not shadows. A late runner. A dog with its own business. Wind that learned a narrow alley upstream and arrived here trying to keep the stride it liked. He names them and lets them go out loud so his own mind will not try to hold them in the dark where they belong to nobody. In the lanes, little tasks carry the load. A spare bowstring rests where a tired hand expects it. A gourd stopper sits, face down. A cord end is tucked away to avoid waving in a draft. which could send the wrong message to the wrong person. The watch captain checks a board near the mess for quiet updates. North ditch is cleared. West gutter needs 2 guys with spades after sunrise. The powder chest latch is secure. He doesn't write compliments. He just writes what's needed. Lowering a lamp in 3 small turns keeps the wick from sulking and teaches the glass to be patient. He takes a sip of tea that tastes smoky and leaves it at that. Reliefs turn like a slow wheel. The man who has been counting the same 4 trees and the same lamp at the far corner steps back, names what he has learned, and hands the ground to the next pair. The new men repeat the path in short words. Stake, knot, board, water, rope. The first man listens like a teacher who wants to be corrected and is pleased when nothing needs correcting. He walks to the mess, sets his bowl down, and remembers that food is not always heat, but sometimes the shape of rice against the palm. He eats without speaking. He sleeps without inventing a different night inside his head. When alarm is practiced, it is practiced as if the camp were a mouth that speaks one clear word. The drum's cloth is lifted and replaced. The shell takes a breath and gives it back. The rope at the gate is tried for speed and for the silence of hands that will not fumble. A runner times the path from the outer post to the commander's tent and adds a heartbeat for mud. The bucket line lifts once and sets down. Then everything is put away again. The practice leaves no bruise on the air. It is folded and returned to its corner like a clean cloth. The watch is not allowed to rehearse fear. It is allowed to rehearse certainty. The hour stretches thin toward the side where dew begins. Cloth learns a cool the lamp cannot correct. Horse breath smokes, and then does not. Men shift from heel to toe and back and decide that the ground is already good enough. Lanes that were brushed at dusk keep their lines. Banners have become ideas. Beyond the curtain, the road thinks of being a road again. It decides to wait. Back in the camp, a kettle edits itself down to 1 small syllable and then silence. The Hyashigi call twice and then sleep under an arm. The captain listens for a thing that is not there and is satisfied to find it missing. If you are listening from your own room, borrow the watch's arithmetic. And softly, as a wick is turned down, out a little longer, as ash is walked over a coal. Let shoulders find the place where straps would hang if they were here, and then let them hang without weight. Let the mind make its own countersign. Here, now enough. The camp keeps its lanes. The water keeps its edge. The night keeps its hour without you holding it. You are allowed to close your eyes before the first pale color arrives along the flags. The camp keeps itself healthy before it sleeps. A trench is freshened at the far edge where wind remembers to visit first. Its lip is squared by spade. A reed screen stands to give modesty and to teach traffic the right lane. A scoop of ash waits in a cedar bucket, cool and gray, ready to quiet what must be quieted. A jar of water wears a lid, and the ladle lies across its mouth, so a sleepy hand will find it where a sleepy hand expects. When a man leaves, ash is sprinkled, earth is pulled, the line is smoothed. Nothing here is dramatic. It is only the daily work that keeps tomorrow from learning the wrong lesson. Water receives its own careful manners. Wells are capped tight. Rope is coiled in a flat spiral so it will not invent knots in the dark. Lidded oak buckets stand at posts with hishaku ladles resting exactly across the rims. A boy walks the line and taps each hoop with 2 fingers. Wood answers with the small sound of things ready to be useful. Beside the store tent, jars for drinking are set away from jars for washing. A narrow board carries tonight's note in a neat hand. Buckets checked. Lids replaced. North gutter cleared. The note is not meant to impress. It is meant to be true when read in the morning. Faces and hands are taught sleep. A tenegui cloth steams a moment over a kettle and then becomes a warm square that lifts dust from cheek and brow. Rice bran in a small bag, a nukabukuro, is dipped in water and used to wash palms and wrists until the skin remembers clean without losing its oils. Teeth are rubbed with a pinch of salt and a twig that knows how to be a brush. The taste is honest and brief. A drop of camellia oil is pressed into chapped knuckles. The cloth is rinsed, wrung without anger, and hung where drafts are polite and smoke will not teach yellow. Feet have their own book of rules. Waraji straps rubbed all day across bone are loosened. A basin of warm water takes grit from heel and toe. Blisters are convinced, not punished. A thread is threaded and laid aside, because tonight is for padding, not for bravado. Salt water touches a sore place, and then a clean square of cloth is tied with a simple knot that the morning can untie. Kaihin leg wraps are shaken, smoothed along their length, and rolled so the weave will remember straight. A finger of camellia oil visits the heels. It is enough. The rest is air and time. Clothing and small gear accept repairs while hands still remember where the day frayed. A needle kit opens like a little shrine. Thread passes once, then once again, through a loose binding on a sunny 8 strap. A robe seam that flirted with daylight is pressed flat and given 3 quiet stitches. The cord end on a quiver tie is whipped so it will not learn to wave in wind. The haft of a yari is wrapped where a palm chewed it. The wrap lies flat and kind. A note about a tired buckle is written on a thin slip and placed where the quartermaster's I will meet it before breakfast. Discovery belongs to scouts, not to straps. Weapons are counted back into their piece. Bowstrings are slipped from nocks and looped a quarter turn around the grip so they will not weigh curious. Arrows are touched by feel in bundles of 12, fletched to point, and returned to quivers with mouths covered. Tanegashima rests with pans closed and cords dry. Powder gourds are wiped at the mouth and the stoppers are turned inward with a twist that promises to hold. Lead sits in its tray like round, quiet punctuation. A clerk writes 2 tidy lines. Arrows returned. Powder checked. He presses the red seal and dries it with a breath over sand. The drawer learns to close without a clack. Animals and kitchens keep their corners honest. Pickets are cleaned, so hooves will not argue with what feet left behind. A brush visits manes and tails until the hair decides to lie like water. Feed is measured by habit, not by hope. Tack that met sweat is hung where air will walk through it before dawn. At the mess, ash is walked over coals until heat remembers to be a neighbor. Rinds and scraps are carried to a pit downwind. The ground is tamped once with the flat of a spade so dogs and crows will be asked to think twice. Nets are lowered where nets are needed. Kaya hangs from hooks over sleeping rolls, a soft green room inside the room. Bedding that aired at the Engawa earlier is shaken once, then settled. A straw mat under the neck is brushed short and quick. A pillow filled with buckwheat hulls is tapped at both ends so the shore under the nape will be even. The lamp is lowered a finger. The oval becomes small. Paper learns to glow only enough to show the path to water and not enough to teach wakefulness. The lamp inside the commander's tent learns its smallest oval and holds it. Canvas cools a degree. The map stones keep their corners as if they had always belonged to this plank. Outside, the grid of lanes, brushed straight at dusk, still reads clean under a sky that has forgotten black and not yet remembered blue. Dew finds rope first, then banner cords, then the low rails of carts. The air smells of damp straw, clean iron, and the faint sweetest edge of ash where braziers were taught humility before sleep. A watchman passes. His sandals measure 4 even answers from the ground. The Hayashiji under his arm do not speak. He prefers that the camp hear nothing and understand everything. Along the perimeter, the tools that disliked company at dusk are pleased with distance again. Matchlocks on their rack have kept their quiet. Pans closed, cords dry, barrels faced away from curiosity. Spears stand like a thin grove, all points agreeing to emptiness. Wraps on the long blades remember the patient hands that folded them and refused to slip. Bowstrings sleep a quarter turn around their grips. Quivers sit with mouths covered, fletchings untempted by damp. Powder gourds keep their stoppers turned inward, modest and sure. The firebreak, raked until the earth looked capable of saying no, holds that word without trying to be clever. Buckets wait in pairs with handles turned toward the work they serve. Lids sit on jars the way good hats sit on heads. Mess and stores have finished speaking in numbers and now speak only in promises. Rice in the chest lies level as a calm breath. Miso remembers the stone on its lid and does not argue about weight. The ledger under cloth keeps the night's totals the way a steady heart keeps account no one hears. A paddle rests where the morning hand will expect it, handle to the left because that is the hand that will lift it. At the adjacent table, orders tied and sealed have chosen their bearers. A runner sleeps with his fingers inside the loop of a cord so the first light will not surprise him into forgetting his job. The seal box breathes cedar and patience. Keys hang with their iron tongues turned toward the room. Armor sleeps in shapes that finally weigh nothing. Helmets sit on their posts like careful moons. Masks rest on folded cloth with straps laid so tomorrow's hands will like them. The dew chest plates and their kusazuri skirts on the yoroi cake frames look less like defense and more like grammar. Plate to plate, cord to cord, buckle toward buckle. Kote's sleeves lie in a roll that remembers wrists. Sunny 8 have turned their buckles inward to teach leather not to warp. A small note on paper says right shoulder lace will want watching. And even the ink seems to understand that this is a gentle request, not a crisis. The lamp near the gear, taught its seed-sized glow, refuses glare and gives only enough light to show a path from sleep to usefulness. The watch turns like a slow wheel that prefers not to boast. 2 men come in from the north ditch, name their trees and the small irregular stone they learned by foot, exchange the countersign with the next pair as if passing a bowl, and lay their path down without bending it. A captain walks the near loop once, tasting the air where water keeps its voice steady. He listens for the sound that is not here, the hurried breath, the metal that refuses to learn a vowel, and finds it missing. The shell horn is kept under cloth. The drum stays tuned and silent. The rope that would wake the camp is tried by touch and then left to sleep. Practice has been folded away like a clean towel. Even the sky observes discipline. Stars that were busy with their counting an hour ago have reduced their company to a few that are patient enough to wait for color. The eastern rim decides to carry a suggestion of pearl. Cloud learns an edge that is not sharp, only certain. A breeze that earlier tried 3 directions chooses one and grows quiet. Roofs beyond the curtain, villages that are not part of the camp and still somehow are, flatten their tile lines as if a hand had smoothed them. Somewhere far off, a water bird makes the kind of sound that refuses to be a sign and is only a bird. It is enough. Inside the Hanjin, the general wakes by degree, not by alarm. Tea touches the lip of a cup, and then the lip of decision. The map table keeps its stones. A finger revises a thought about the ford by moving a weight the breadth of a grain of rice. Orders already copied do not need new ink. They need feet, and those feet are being promised by the men breathing in slow agreement along the lanes. One lamp is turned down to its smallest true shape. Another is pinched to memory and covered. The canvas wall holds its steady breath without asking for praise. The camp's last chores are the kind that never receive credit and keep everything from breaking. Latches are tested by feel. Bars lift and set without a thud. A hinge gets the briefest oil and chooses silence. The boy who checks buckets taps 2 hoops and smiles at their small wooden answers. A horse's girth strap is moved 1 hole for kindness rather than necessity. A runner's sandal thong is retied flat so it will not teach the foot a bad lesson on the first rise. The ash on the brazier is walked once more until heat decides to be neighborly and stay under. A kettle gives 1 syllable and then keeps its counsel. Notes on the board read short and even, north gutter clear, powder latch honest, rope at west gate good. And now the camp decides how to wait. Men who must rise with the first color breathe in lines that match the lanes. Those who are allowed another hour fold that hour like a blanket and keep it warm. The world around them, poles, cords, canvas, iron, water, has taken the shape that sleep prefers. If you listen, the grid has a pulse, not in drums, but in small obediences finished, sandals heel to toe, cords laid flat, cups turned mouth down, lamps taught their smallest ovals. The story of the day is not erased. It is shelved. The first sentence of the morning is already written in rope and stone. It will read itself later. We'll leave you here, in the held breath before dawn. The banners furled, the lamps small, the watch steady, the map sure under its stones. Keep the camp's measure as you drift, and softly, as dew settles on rope, out a little longer, as ash folds over ember. Let shoulders learn the hinge that does not thud. Let thoughts line up like sandals on a rack and rest. In a moment, the screen will go dark and a long hour of quiet ambient music will carry you the rest of the way. Sleep well.